Hello friends, welcome to this video of class 10th chapter 1 chemical reactions and equations. Now when we talk about chemical reactions and equations, we usually talk about chemical processes. If I say chemical reaction, I'm talking about a chemical process. A chemical process in which two or more than two substances combine to form a new product. There are various instances in our daily life also in which new substances are formed and we fail to acknowledge those processes as chemical reactions in which new compounds are being formed. For example, milk, when it is left at room temperature during summers, its taste changes, its color changes, and that is because a chemical reaction has taken place. An iron nail, an iron object, any iron object, when it is left exposed in air, when it is left exposed to humid conditions, it develop a rusty coat. That rusty coat is called rusting and the process is called corrosion. That also is a chemical reaction. Grapes are fermented. By fermenting of these grapes, alcohol is formed, wine is formed. That in itself is a chemical equation in which the glucose is fermented to get ethanol and we get ethanol from it. Food is being cooked. Every day we take up different meals and in that we are easily able to visualize that food before cooking and food after cooking are entirely different. And the cooking of food also is a chemical reaction. Then the food gets digested in our body. Food gets digested, that is the glucose that we eat usually gives us energy in the form of ATP, and not only energy, the food gets converted into smaller molecules, complex from its large complex molecule, it gets converted into smaller molecules. Respiration also, we take in oxygen. That oxygen combines with food that we eat, and together both of them they form glucose. In all of the above situation, we have identified, we are able to visualize that the initially and the substance which was available in the final form are two entirely different things. Initially it was something else, finally it was something else, and because initial and final, the two things are entirely different, we say that a chemical reaction has taken place. So in simpler words, we can describe a chemical reaction as when two or more than two substances chemically combine to form a third substance which is entirely different from the substances 1 and 2. For example, let's take an equation. We take up H2, that is hydrogen, and O2, that is oxygen, and this hydrogen and oxygen together they combine to form water. Now hydrogen is gas. Oxygen also is gas, but we get H2O, that is water, and it is usually available in liquid form. Hydrogen supports burning, that is in fact the fuel that we use in rockets is also hydrogen. Oxygen supports combustion. We all know that no combustion is possible without oxygen. Whereas the water formed, H2O which is formed, this H2O do not support combustion. H2O do not support combustion. So this in itself, we can see that it is a process in which hydrogen and oxygen with entirely different properties combine to form H2O, water, which has entirely different properties. Moving further, we can say that if there is a chemical reaction, then certainly there must be some process by which we get to know that a chemical reaction has taken place. How will I get to know that a chemical reaction has taken place? Certainly there must be some processes, certainly there must be some things that we should visualize, that we should try to observe, and when we'll observe them, then only we'll be able to identify whether the chemical reaction has taken place or not. So there are four simpler things which we try to observe, and when we observe any one of them, we say that a chemical reaction has taken place. Now, how do we do that? The first thing that we try to observe is change in state. Whenever change in state takes place, we see that the reactants initially and the product which is formed are in two different states. Now, when that happens, we get to know that a chemical reaction has taken place. For example, the reaction that we just observed, the reaction that we just saw, that is in which hydrogen and oxygen, they combine to form water. Now, hydrogen was in liquid form. Oh, sorry, hydrogen was in gaseous form. Oxygen also was in gaseous form, but when both of them combine, they form water. And water was available in liquid form. So as soon as the physical condition of the reactants change, we get to know that a chemical reaction has taken place. The second is change in color, a very common reaction which is visible in our household for change in color is rusting. The substances which are available around us, iron, as we see, iron is grayish in color, but when it rusts, it forms a brownish layer of ferrous oxide. That is the chemical name of rust. So when that brownish layer forms, we get to know that a chemical reaction has taken place. The third is evolution of gas. Evolution of gas, a very simple chemical reaction is when we put zinc in acid in any acid. Now when zinc is put in acid, a gas is evolved, hydrogen gas is evolved. We observe effervescence, we observe bubbles, and as soon as we observe bubbles, we get to know that a chemical reaction has taken place because hydrogen gas is being evolved. And the fourth is change in temperature. Now what do you mean by change in temperature? Change in temperature means that when temperature of substances change. When temperature of substances change, we get to know that a chemical reaction has taken place. That is, when calcium oxide reacts with water, it forms calcium hydroxide. It is a chemical reaction in which so much amount of heat is evolved that the calcium hydroxide which is evolved becomes very hot. The utensil in which this entire chemical reaction is taking place, it becomes so hot that it becomes impossible to hold that utensil. And when it happens, we get to know that a chemical reaction has taken place. So, in totality, we have seen four basic things, four basic observations by which we get to know whether a chemical reaction has taken place or not. The first one is change in state. The second is change in color. The third is evolution of gas. And the fourth one was change in temperature. Thank you. In the next part, we'll talk about the types of chemical reactions.